Welcome to the wonderful world of books, one of Seven Worlds and Seven World Productions, a subsidiary of Angelgram Music. My name is Gino, and I am the sole owner of Angelgram Music, as well as executive director of Seven World Productions. Continuing in the series of the book In Search of Beauty, here is Chapter 2, Rene, that is the next episode in this series, and hope you enjoy it. Previously on The Wonderful World of Books in Search of Beauty, Chapter 1, Catherine. The sixth significant event of that year was the fact that we were moving again. In the month of November, my dad accepted a post at the Hungarian Evangelical Reformed Church of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. This was turning into standard operating procedure for the family by now. But for me personally, it was the first time I actually cried when we left because I knew I would never see June again. Chapter 2, Rene. Johnstown was formally organized as a town in 1800 by the Swiss-German immigrant Joseph Johns. The settlement was initially known as Schatzstand, but was soon anglicized to Johnstown. From 1834 to 1854, the city was a port and key transfer point along the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal. Johnstown was at the head of the canal's western branch, with canal boats having been transported over the mountains via the Allegheny Portage Railroad and refloated here to continue the trip by water to Pittsburgh and the Ohio Valley. Perhaps the most famous passenger via the canal to visit Johnstown briefly was Charles Dickens in 1842. By 1854, canal transport became redundant with the completion of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which now spanned the state. With the coming of the railroads, the city's growth did not miss a beat. In fact, the tempo was stepped up. Johnstown became a stop on the main line of the Pennsylvania Railroad and was connected with the Baltimore and Ohio. The railroads provided large-scale development of the region's mineral wealth. Iron, coal, and steel quickly became central to the town of Johnstown. By 1860, the Cambria Iron Company of Johnstown was the leading steel producer in the United States, outproducing steel giants Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Through the second half of the 19th century, Johnstown made much of the nation's barbed wire. Johnstown prospered from skyrocketing demand in the western United States for barbed wire. 20 years after its founding, the Cambria Works was a huge enterprise, sprawling over 60 acres in Johnstown and employing 7,000 people. It owned 40,000 acres of valuable mineral lands in a region with a ready supply of iron, coal, and limestone. Floods were almost a yearly event in the valley during the 1880s. On the afternoon of May 30th, 1889, following a quiet Memorial Day ceremony and parade, it began raining in the valley. The next day, water filled the streets, and rumors began starting that a dam holding an artificial lake in the mountains to the northeast might give way. The dam did give way, and an estimated 20 million tons of water began spilling into the winding gorge that led to Johnstown some 14 miles away. The destruction in Johnstown occurred in only about 10 minutes. What had been a thriving steel town with homes, churches, saloons, a library, a railroad station, electric streetlights, a roller skating rink, and 2 opera houses was buried under mud and debris. At least 2,209 people were known to have perished in the disaster. The flood established the American Red Cross as the preeminent emergency relief organization in the United States. Founder Clara Barton, who was 67 years old, came to Johnstown with 50 doctors and nurses and set up tent hospitals as well as temporary hotels for the homeless and stayed on for 5 months to coordinate relief efforts. The mills were back in operation within a month. The Cambria works grew, and Johnstown became more prosperous than ever. The disaster had not destroyed the community, but strengthened it. Later generations would draw on lessons learned in 1889. Johnstown was a remarkably prosperous, hard-working city during the interwar years. In the early 20th century, the population reached 75,000 people. Its public transportation was considered one of the best of any small cities in the United States. The city's first commercial radio station, WJAC, began broadcasts in 1925. The downtown boasted at least 5 major department stores, including Glosser Brothers, which in the 1950s gave birth to the GB chain of department stores. However, the St. Patrick's Day 1936 flood, combined with the gnawing effects of the Great Depression, left Johnstown struggling again, but only temporarily. Johnstown citizens mobilized to achieve a permanent solution to the flooding problem and wrote to President Franklin Roosevelt pleading for federal aid. Starting in August 1938, continuing for the next 5 years, the United States Army Corps of Engineers gouged, widened, deepened, and realigned 9.2 miles of channel in the city and encased the riverbanks in concrete and reinforced steel. In a campaign organized by the Chamber of Commerce, thousands of Johnstown citizens wrote to friends and relatives across the country, hoping to bring new business to the town. The memory of floods was virtually purged from the community's consciousness. The immediate post-World War II years marked Johnstown's peak as a steel maker and fabricator. At its peak, steel provided Johnstowners with more than 13,000 full-time, well-paying jobs. It was this atmosphere of confidence that brought my parents to this region. We would stay here for 9 years. My formative years were influenced by the surroundings of this steel-producing city and work ethic of hard-working Americans in a trade industry would be forever etched in my mind. I finished first grade at Johnstown and acquired the knowledge of the written word very quickly. My dad took me to school for the first several days until I became familiar with the neighborhood. Chestnut Street Grade School was 3 blocks from our parsonage, which was nestled behind the church. Chestnut Street was located in Cambria City, a suburb of Johnstown, about a mile or 2 away from the world-famous incline plane. The incline was a car on rails that would climb the mountain at the Conemaugh River in downtown Johnstown, up 1,693.5 feet on a 35-degree angle, the steepest vehicular incline plane in the world. It had the capacity to carry people and several cars at the same time. When I started second grade in 1955, my brother Stephen started kindergarten, and we walked together to school from the corner of 9th Avenue and Chestnut, where the church was located, to between 5th and 6th Avenue, where the school was located. On the way home from school, we would walk past a little storefront home between 9th and 8th Avenue, where we could purchase candy and gum for pennies. 2 bazooka bubble gums cost a penny, with comics on the wrapper. Our dad had given us a 2-week allowance for such expenses. I received 30 cents, Stephen got 20, and Paul got 10. We were on cloud 9, and we thought we were very rich and prosperous. In July of 1955, my dad took on a second job of teaching at a summer camp for second and third generation Hungarian children at the Bethlehem home in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. My mother had been at the church practicing on the organ, and on her way back to the parsonage had fallen down the concrete steps at the front of the church. She had twisted her ankle as she hobbled back to the parsonage. She gave me the telephone number to call Dad in Ligonier, and he came home to take her to the hospital. He said he was very proud of the way I calmly explained to him over the phone what had happened. He said that I acted very grown up, and he was very pleased with how I handled the emergency. He promised that the following year I could accompany him to the summer camp in Ligonier. As it turned out, we all went, including my mother, who taught Hungarian folk songs and dances to the 100 or more children that signed up for camp. During that same year, my parents became naturalized citizens of America. Both of them had studied hard for the written and oral test, and my mother had sufficiently learned the English language to get by. She got lots of help from the members of the English-speaking Hungarians at church. My parents took an oath of allegiance and had been granted citizenship in the great USA, but they never forgot their Hungarian heritage and made sure we didn't either. We spent 7 more summers in Ligonier learning all about the Hungarian language, its literature, its music and history. It would shape the future of our lives and instill in us the rich heritage of our ancestry. Well, it happened in Miss Schaefer's 3rd grade class in the fall of 1956. 3rd grade teacher Miss Schaefer specialized in music, and the 4th grade teacher Miss Drummond specialized in art. When the 4th grade class came downstairs for their music lesson with Miss Schaefer, we went upstairs to Miss Drummond's art class. As the 4th grade class came into our room and lined up against the wall, my eyes riveted to a black-haired, blue-eyed young female. My pulse was drumming hard and fast in my ears, and my body began to perspire like a dripping faucet. I could not take my eyes off of her. I had not noticed that our class had all risen to their feet to leave and ascend the stairs to Miss Drummond's class for a lesson in painting landscapes. "Stand up, Eugene," quipped Miss Schaefer. "It's time for your art class." I quickly stood as everyone snickered and mumbled quietly at my misfortune. I didn't care. I kept glancing at her as we lined up row by row to go upstairs. As I passed by her, my heart leapt into my throat, and I could hardly keep walking. Her eyes melted into mine, and I knew that I had to find out her name. I was hooked. The female allure had worked, and I had to know more about what was happening to me. It was years later that I asked myself the question, why some females are more attractive than others. What are the characteristics of the female sex that are attractive? Is it the color of the hair or eyes? Is it the shape of their nose or ears? What about the shape of their bodies, tall, short, fat, or skinny? Why is one face more attractive than another? How much does behavior depend on the quality of these features? Or perhaps it's as basic as scent? As a 3rd grader, I was not able to pose these questions very thoughtfully, but somehow I knew that I was on to some mystery here, and I wanted to solve it. I have always been curious about life and why things happen the way they do. It wasn't until the next year in 4th grade that I finally had the nerve to ask the girl her name. I followed her home from school one day. She lived 4 blocks from the school, and as I approached her front doorstep, she turned and asked, "What do you want, Eugene?" I was shocked that she knew my name. "I just wanted to know your name," I blurted with tongue-tied fervor. "Rene," she said. "Rene Mack." I did not even reply. I ran as fast as I could toward our home that was 5 blocks in the opposite direction from the school. My heart pounded as I stormed into the house and raced up the stairs to the privacy of my bedroom. Not so private, really. I had to share it with my 2 younger brothers, Stephen and Paul, aged 6 and 4, respectively. Since our parents were immigrants from Hungary, we spoke Hungarian at home and English at school. We were bilingual before it was fashionable to be bilingual. "Where have you been?" whispered Stephen, who had just gotten home from school ahead of me. "Mom's been asking why you didn't walk home with me today. I told her you had to stay and clean erasers for Miss Schaefer." You know, I tell you, there's something to say about brotherly love. Even though we fought a good many times amongst ourselves, when it came time to cover for each other in front of our mom, we could count on brotherly love. I did not know then that the females of the race know when their territory is invaded. Mothers who have sons instinctively know the instant another female comes into their sons' lives. It is like unto an invasion. They smell the female pheromones and inquire immediately. They are determined to interrogate their sons about every detail of any possible relationships. What is her name? Is she pretty? What color are her eyes, her hair? I did not realize until my first year in college, in my psychology class, that such questionings were deep primordial instincts in parents to determine the best possible candidate for mating and propagating the race. The phrase, "beauty is in the eye of the beholder," had new meaning for me after that class. Rene Mack was stunning and very beautiful. She had jet black hair with Shirley Temple-like curls all over. She had azure eyes that sparkled like dazzling lapis lazuli stones. I was enamored and stung for the first time, even though she was a year older than me. The following year, the 5th and 6th grade classes were combined. Miss Elliott taught both classes together in one room. I was in heaven. Rene and I were in the same classroom. In celebration of Christmas, Miss Elliott assigned everyone a secret pal to exchange a small Christmas present. No one knew whom he or she would receive, but everyone knew who had to give one to. I was assigned Rene. I was ecstatic. My father helped me pick out a pen and pencil set at the local department store, Penn Traffic. They were in a nice box, and the store wrapped it for us. That was the first time I felt like my dad and I were best buddies. When it came time to exchange gifts, I proudly walked over to Rene's desk and gave her my present. I smiled at her as she took the box, and I caught a glimpse of the name on her present to her secret pal. You guessed it, it was my name. I could not believe it. She smiled at me and handed me her present and said, "Merry Christmas." I rushed back to my desk on the opposite side of the classroom and quickly opened my present from Rene. It was a chain-link bracelet that had a picture inside it. It was a picture of her smiling. I looked across the room at Rene, and just then she looked at me and smiled. I was floating in the air. Such was my initiation into that incredible life-altering state of puppy love. It was also during that year that I was introduced to my second love, piano music. Every Sunday night, my parents watched The Ed Sullivan Show on our black and white TV in the living room. My brothers and I were allowed to watch, and I especially remember this one show where Ed had a pianist as a guest. His name was Oscar Levant. He played the saber dance with the CBS orchestra, and I was mesmerized. My face was glued to the TV as Mr. Levant whirled through the piece with a big finish. During the applause and subsequent commercial, I turned to my parents, who were sitting behind us on the sofa, and announced, "I want to learn how to play that piece." My father responded with the usual adult phrase, "We'll see. A piano costs a lot of money, and we'll have to wait till we can afford it." Imagine such a concept. With no credit cards invented yet, people actually had to wait until they could afford to get something. Nevertheless, within 1 year, my parents bought a 6-foot grand piano from Steinway Hall in New York City. We actually drove to Manhattan from western Pennsylvania and tried out a few Steinways, but they were too expensive. The salesman then took us to the basement of their hall and showed us a 6-foot ebony finished grand piano with the brand name of Hardman. He said because it was used and did not have the Steinway logo etched on the fallboard, they would sell it to us for $2,000. My father said fine. He took out his wallet and gave the salesman $2,000 in cash. The wide-eyed man took the money graciously and said, "Well, because you are paying cash, we'll deliver the piano free of charge." My father said, "Thank you very much. We live in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Will that be too far?" The salesman smiled and said, "Well, under the circumstances, because you are a cash-paying customer, we will honor our pledge to deliver free of charge." And so it came to pass that Steinway Piano Company delivered a 6-foot grand piano with a Hardman logo free of charge from Manhattan to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a 614-mile round trip, a business deal unheard of today. It was many years later that I learned My father had gone to the elders of the church in Johnstown to ask for an advance on his salary to pay for the piano. The $2,000 was half a year's salary for him. How many parents today would be willing to sacrifice half a year's salary for a one-item luxury purchase? As a boy, I did not know of this sacrifice. All I knew was that I had a chance to learn the saber dance. The church organist just happened to have the sheet music for that piece. I started piano lessons with Mrs. George Hayes, the wife of a prominent doctor in Johnstown. She was a graduate of the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. Thanks to Mrs. Hayes, I quickly learned how to read music and started to practice all my pieces she assigned to me so that I could learn the saber dance. I especially wanted to impress Rene with my musical abilities, so I was motivated to stay at it. I even practiced during the summer months when school was out. I wanted to show everyone how I loved to play the music on the piano. During this same year, another female came into my life, one that would forever change my life and help me become the person I am today. She would instill in me an appreciation of the rich heritage of my Hungarian ancestry, culture, history, and language. She would impact my development as a human being and enrich my life with her experiences. To this day, I owe a great deal to my grandmother, my dad's mother, Cornelia. If you like this episode, click like and add your comments. Better still, why don't you subscribe if you haven't already so that you may receive email notifications of future episodes. Also, check out our other worlds at Seven World Productions: the world of art, the world of faith, the world of family, the world of food, the world of games, and the world of music. Go and be inspired.